Hello everybody, this is Conservative Night. Just kind of disappointed really. What I want to know is when did this channel, TestTube News, something I've been subscribed to for a year at least, become a barking liberal parrot? That's what I'd like to know. And this isn't just an emotional rant because I'm a conservative, because I'm also a voter of Donald Trump. And yes, I've kind of flip-flopped my vote in the Conservative Party, but it doesn't really matter. All this channel has done for the past 6 months is just parrot and bark about liberal nonsense, particularly with their new host that they have. One of their new hosts. So, we're going to go ahead and take a look at this particular claim. I've watched the video, so I can already conclude that it's nonsense. So we're going to go through this start to finish, and then I'll pause and critique as we go. Is Donald Trump a fascist? Now, the debate itself is absurd enough because it's watering down a term used from a murderous dictator in Mussolini who was an imperialist, invaded Ethiopia, and wreaked havoc with his own people. It is an extremely authoritarian, it is a centrist ideology, mind you, that mixes socialist aspects with free markets combined with extreme authoritarianism. And so, even that is extreme. When you call somebody a fascist, it's like calling them a Nazi. It's a pejorative, it's not an argument. But here you have TestTube, this channel that's supposed to be about informing people, the channel that's supposed to be about science, intellectual discourse, remaining neutral, informing people. After all, what's the name TestTube if not for science? Let me adjust this mic here. So we're going to go through these claims. I won't leave you waiting any longer.
Following terror attacks in France and the US, presidential hopeful Donald Trump called for Muslims to be barred from entering the United States. This form of controversial rhetoric has been a consistent theme during the Trump campaign. Some, including Jeb Bush's national security advisor, are suggesting that his political ideology resembles fascism. So we wanted to know, is Donald Trump actually a fascist? Well, the problem with identifying a fascist is that the label is applied to a huge number of differing political theories. It was actually Italy's Benito Mussolini who is considered the founder of fascism. In a nutshell, the ideology is based on strengthening a country through extreme nationalism, a powerful leader, and the exclusion of weaker groups. An essay by Italian philosopher Umberto Eco distinguishes 14 characteristics which are found in fascism, and which have been the subject of accusations against Donald Trump. Eco says that fascism relies on a cult of tradition while rejecting modernism. In many ways, new ideas are seen as the beginning of modern depravity, and with a breakdown in moral and traditional order comes chaos. It's then unsurprising that even Trump's slogan, "Make America Great Again," plays in line with traditionalism.
No, it doesn't play in line with traditionalism because what it's doing is suggesting that this country needs to go back to leading the world. That has nothing to do with going back to leading the world in traditional ways. Because I have news for you, TestTube. The last 100 years has been slowly and slowly seeing less and less growth in the United States because of the increasing net of government control. government control, and liberal nonsense. So when you talk about make America great again, what he's talking about is get our trade deficits down, start exporting goods again, start manufacturing. He's talking about great as in the results, not great as in the ideal. So your perversion of make America great again is just idiotic. It does not follow any kind of logic, and you're going to see this in this whole video with TestTube. They make so many logical stretches and changes, misrepresentations, and repeating of lies, parroting, because this channel is a liberal parrot. So let's continue.
And his fear of things, like the internet, speaks to the fascist fear of modern.
Fear of things such as the internet. No, he does not fear the internet. What he fears is ISIS. I don't necessarily agree with his position. I think there's more nuanced steps you can take than simply closing off the internet. But to say he fears the internet rather than fearing the enemy is incorrect. This is about the war on ISIS, and the one thing that he is correct about, you may not agree with his methodology. I don't necessarily agree with it, but he is treating this like it is a war with ISIS. ISIS, if you have not been informed, TestTube, has declared war on the West. Yeah, they have outright declared war. Now, when Al Qaeda declared war on the West, what did we do? What did the Clinton doctrine do? Nothing. So what did they do? They bombed our embassies, they bombed our naval ships, ramming them, killing our military, and then eventually 9/11 happens. And then it gets pushed on to George W. Bush. Because of the Clinton doctrine. The Clinton doctrine that just because some radical extremist group declares war, it does not mean we act, because we treat them, as Obama calls it, as the JV team. Yeah, JV. Tell that to Paris. Tell that to these ISIS sympathizers who are going around, such as San Bernardino. Yeah, so it's about ISIS. It has nothing to do with fear of the internet. You are making horrible logical stretches, and that's just a fact. Own up to it.
depravity. Another hallmark of fascism is anti-intellectualism. In this way, knowledgeable criticism is not only ignored, but ridiculed. Trump says that he is very smart, but he has also suggested that knowing things doesn't make you a good leader. Further character.
Okay, so this is your whole argument, TestTube. Hang on, we're going to repeat this. This is just hilarious. This is just hilarious because this is their whole argument.
But he has also suggested that knowing things doesn't make you a good leader. He is very smart, but he has also suggested that knowing things doesn't make you a good leader. Very smart, but he has also suggested that knowing things doesn't make you a good leader.
There you have it, folks. One statement by Donald Trump. Not even a quote, a statement that says knowing things does not make you a great leader is all the evidence that TestTube needs in order to determine that Donald Trump believes in anti-intellectualism. There it is. That's all. Hang on, listen.
Further characteristics are based on the idea.
Okay, see? He goes on to something else. So that is his only characteristic. Why am I subscribed to this channel? Because it's just, if this is all the evidence they need, I'm sorry, but this is just, it's sad. I could stop the video right here after that. And as far as the statement itself, take the statement without any context. Having knowledge does not make you a great leader. Who would say that isn't true? Because You could be smart. There's a lot of smart people. But being smart does not make you a great leader. Having knowledge does not make you a great leader. You have to have more than knowledge. You have to have the ability to get people to see your way, get results, understand how to get those results, and get people behind you, and keep them behind you. Those are the things that make a great leader. It's not just about having knowledge. And so, TestTube is wrong on many different fronts, and it's sad to see them go down this route. But let's continue to listen.
That dissent and diversity are bad, and they weaken discourse and society. Almost by definition, Echo says that fascism is racist, or at the very least, anti-diversity. Trump's rampant xenophobia, within which he proposes deporting 11 million immigrants and blocking entry to the U.S. for Muslims, is an open appeal to extreme nationalism.
Okay, this is... Now, they've already jumped the shark, so it really can't get any worse, but we're going to go ahead and refute this anyhow. Um, so, first of all, the xenophobia. The definition of xenophobia is being afraid of immigration. Trump at no point has said he fears immigration. Not once. Not once has Donald Trump said that immigration is a bad thing. Donald Trump has attacked particular kinds of immigration. Illegal immigration, for example, when you have when you have people that are smuggled here from overseas, and when you have Mexicans crossing the Rio Grande. That is the kind of immigration that Trump does not want, where people come here illegally without documentation and they outcompete our workers because people in this country abuse that fact and they can pay these people next to nothing. And so what happens is you get illegals working for $2 an hour on a farm, whereas you get people, the rest of the people in this country, the actual citizens, even the legal immigrants, they're without jobs. They're lining up at temp places, unemployment offices, huge lines, and yet there's other people making slave wages. So, tell you what, since you want to echo liberalism, so let's talk about sweatshops. And I think we're all against sweatshops and horrible working conditions. Now, there's something to be said about deregulating labor costs, but I don't think anybody wants us to the point where we're going to become a sweatshop. So, every time liberals go on to this point about illegal immigration equals xenophobia, they're doing two things, and both of these things are against our interests. Number one, they are appealing to these sweatshop wages because that's what these people are making. They are making wages just the same as those in a sweatshop. It is a pure market wage. That means they make next to nothing. They make next to nothing. And they're also supporting higher unemployment rates for the rest of the country because other companies cannot compete with those insanely low wages. And so that's just how you get nonsense. And of course, the deportations. You can debate whether or not it's possible to deport 11 million people. To be honest, and the same with the Muslim travel ban, it's. I don't think you guys understand something about negotiations. Is that when you negotiate, you start off with something more than what you want in order to get what you want. And this is what Trump is doing. And it's probably not doing him a service by me saying this, which is why I hesitate to say it, because it's nothing that I want to hurt Trump on, but it's like I've said in all my other videos, I'm about the truth. And however that I can get to that truth. Let me make sure my mic's working. 1 second. There we go. Okay, it's working. I don't want to go through another video of this. Anyhow, you get to a point of negotiation by asking for more than what you want. And that is why you get very extreme positions from Donald Trump. It's not because he truly believes what he's saying. What he wants is us to wake up to the fact that, number one, we are at war with ISIS. They have declared war openly, and they have committed acts of war against the West. So you either have to answer that or ignore it. Like it or not, ISIS is a country. They have all the tenets of a country, whether or not they are recognized by the UN or not. Because ISIS, number one, they have borders. Number two, they have the ability to defend those borders. Number three, they have the ability to wage war with other countries through their terrorist actions. They are a country, and we have to start treating them as such. And so when it comes to Muslims, whether or not you agree with how far he wants to go, the fact is, what he is saying is, you've got to treat that threat seriously. And yes, you have to look some at the fact that somebody is a Muslim, both because of the text in the Quran and because of the affiliation of ISIS with a literal interpretation of the Quran's text. You have to do that. That's just reality. You can't live in a non reality and assume that all groups are creating these terrorist acts equally, international terrorism. No. It's Muslims doing the international terrorism. So let's continue on.
In his presidential announcement speech, Trump latched onto another important fascist quality. Enemies of the state are defined as being strong and needlessly wealthy. At the same time, they're able to be brought down by a heroic, charismatic leader. For Trump, this enemy is China, and he is that leader. There are
Strong and needlessly wealthy. When has Donald Trump said that China is strong and needlessly wealthy? And by the way, when talking about enemies of the state, fascism is referring to domestic enemies of the state. He's not referring to other countries that are needlessly wealthy. That's not what fascism is. Fascism is about picking out people who will depose the government and taking them out. So you get China, and what he's saying about China, not that they're strong and needlessly wealthy. In fact, he says quite the opposite. He says the same thing about Mexico too, but even China. That China is dependent on us. That is the weakness of them being an exporting nation to the United States. It's where their wealth comes from, but they're not strong. And Trump points out this fact that they are not strong, that they are dependent on our exports. In fact, you could look at quotes of him saying that if we put a tariff on them, they'd go out of business. They would be killed by a tariff on their goods if we put it on them. and he talks about using our economic advantage as a weapon against China. And see, that is where Trump's beef with China comes from, is that the huge trade deficit, like the $400 billion trade deficit that we have with China, which is absolutely insane. He's not wrong about that. But at no point did Trump, and this is the fundamental stupidity of TestTube here, at no point did Trump ever point to China as an enemy of the state. He pointed to them as orchestrating criminal acts, either through cyber terrorism and through um, the trade deficit, or he referred to it as a theft, not necessarily as criminal, but still. The point I'm making is that this has nothing to do with fascism and is yet another. If it's not a lie by test tube, it is an extreme distortion of reality. By making these kinds of distortions, you can argue that anybody's a fascist. All you have to do is change their words and redefine words.
Even more subtle aspects of Trump's rhetoric and campaign, which reflect fascist attitudes of machismo and sexually demeaning mores. The way Trump speaks to and about women.
What about fascism is demeaning people and has anything to do with sexism? Whether or not that is true or not, because Trump says this about everybody. He doesn't just say it about, and you're going to see him admit it in a second. Let's
As
listen.
well as in relation to other men, illustrates these thoughts.
To women as in addition to other men. So in other words, you just defeated your own argument there. Thank you.
But perhaps the most identifiable aspect is what is called the big lie, the concept of newspeak, or using language and discourse to support lies and half-truths. Despite being regularly called out as lying, Trump simply denies the allegations. He usually attacks the source of the accusation and often the media in general. Still, some say that Trump.
So, really, that's your definition of newspeak, is when somebody lies and attacks the source? Oh gee. Telling lies, half truths, and going after the media. Oh gee. What could that have to do with? Could that have to do with being a politician? I mean, isn't this what we associate with the traditional politician? Somebody who will lie, twist, and manipulate words in order to get elected and then not do a damn thing he says? What, like Obama? You think? So, if this is going to be your definition of a fascist, well, then there's, what is Obama, the 49th president? No, he's the 48th president. So, 47 fascists before, oh, God, this guy, test tube is retarded. You know, pretty much this is the end of their fascist claims. Um, so there you have it. Test tube news. The new liberal parrot has nothing. This channel has nothing to do with being informed anymore. This channel has nothing to do with science. It has nothing to do with neutrality. It has nothing to do with being rational. This channel has become a liberal parrot, and I suggest doing what I've just done here. Thanks for listening. God bless.